Hello, boys and girls. Welcome in to the Boys and Girl Podcast with Cowboys NFL Network reporter Jane Slater and NFL Network producer Bobby Belt. A Cowboys community with the inside scoop on the Dallas Cowboys. Now, coming straight to you from the Lone Star State, here's Jane and Bobby.
Well, Bobby, I joked about it on Twitter this week. It felt so good to not only talk football, but football in the sense that it got Cowboys Twitter talking again. In fact, feeling alive following news that myself, Tom Pelissero, and Ian Rappaport reported late on Wednesday night, the acquisition of former Vikings defensive end Everson Griffen. What were your thoughts, Bobby?
So this is really interesting because I think that when you look at I think we're seeing a definite shift. I think you and I talked about this earlier in the offseason, that when you look at the amount of guaranteed money they handed out this offseason to outside free agents, Gerald McCoy, Don Terry Poe, Clinton Dix, things like that, they're really investing in outside free agents more than they have in their time under Jason Garrett. And this just speaks further to it, going out there and taking this gamble on Everson Griffen the way they sort of did with Robert Quinn. And, I think that there's still a lot left in the tank with Everson Griffen. He's a, four-time Pro Bowler. He's had 10 sacks in a season 3 different times. Last season had 8 sacks, 10 years in the league now, grizzled veteran, but, it seems like there's still a lot more left in the tank. But it is interesting to note how the Cowboys have kind of shifted a little bit from, we're just drafting young and we're looking to replace, people with younger talent, that they're going a little bit more in this direction of maybe we've lacked something in terms of veteran presence in the locker room, something that Michael Bennett seemed to see when he got here, and that they're saying, you know what, now we're going to go out there and we're going to invest in some of these guys who have been around the block a little bit and bring some of these younger guys along. And
let's not underestimate what I'm finding in some of the acquisitions of these free agents. The Cowboys finally winning out a lot of these free agents. I mean, we've talked in years past, they've gone to the Rams, they've gone to the Saints. It's my understanding that a lot of these players are coming because of their relationship with McCarthy. Aldon Smith, we talked about McCarthy before he even took the Cowboys job, was out there in December last offseason, at Unbreakable Performance, had meetings with Aldon Smith, felt good enough about him, bring him on board. Guys like, I believe it was Don Terry Poe. Wasn't he one of them, or was it Gerald McCoy that spoke to McCarthy's influence? And now when I reached out about Everson Griffen, because the Seattle Seahawks were very much in play, I was told the reason why he wanted to come to Dallas was not only a chance at the Super Bowl, which I love Twitter, they scoff at that, but also McCarthy, his relationship with them, but his familiarity with other guys on this coaching staff, and namely George Edwards, who of course was with him with the Vikings. Harrison Smith, in fact, when I caught up with him at the Pro Bowl and asked about George Edwards, he talked about what a tremendous loss it was to lose him, because he was so valuable to them, specifically the defense. So I do think that's interesting. Bobby, I know on Twitter you alluded to the fact that there has been this narrative out there that there's something a little off with Everson Griffen as it relates to people and their takeaways in dealing with Everson. Without getting into too much of that, because I don't want to put some speculation out there, I received similar texts from media members who had said things along the line of, good luck with Everson down there in Dallas. I haven't had much interaction with him. But with that being said, I think you've got to go and talk to the guys that have been in the locker room, which I did. I not only talked to a coach, but 2 former teammates. And the takeaways that I got was, one called him the locker room MVP. Another said one of the top 3 players that he's ever played with. And then I was also told that he was shocked that it took so long for a team to pick him up. And that this guy was going to be an absolute beast for them, but literally considered him the locker room MVP. I think that says a lot about it. Maybe he's difficult in his interactions with the media. We've certainly dealt with that with players in the past, but I think if he can gel with his teammates and make a contribution on this defensive line opposite DeMarcus Lawrence, that's a good thing for the Cowboys.
Yeah, and I mean, look, some of it, I think, we don't have to deal completely in speculation. We can look at things that are out there. Tom Pelissero from NFL Network, of course, he wrote a piece this offseason in an interview with Everson Griffen, where Everson Griffen, he spent time, treating a lot of things relating to alcohol. And he, there was an issue in 2018 where very publicly, the Vikings had said they didn't want him back in the facility until he had, gone through a mental health evaluation. And so there is a little bit of a question of these things that some people may see as, problems or issues a la Alden Smith or Randy Gregory, that they may similarly apply to Everson Griffen, that it's not so much, a hothead streak or anything else, that it's more related to, just dealing with the challenges, like a lot of people, of mental health and mental health concerns. And it seems like a lot of people, Everson included, like I say in that interview he gave to Tom Pelissero, who feels like Everson's in a good spot now. And I think that with George Edwards here, he probably has a good grasp on where Everson is and how he's progressed over the last couple of years, and must be confident enough to bring him in here. But I do think it also goes without saying that as much as there's some positivity building here, the Cowboys undoubtedly know that there are risks involved here, just like there are risks involved in going out and getting Alden Smith. So it's an exciting thing. It's a big deal, in terms of it's a great deal. It's a bargain, 1 year, $6 million, with $3 million of that tied up in roster bonuses and being active and things like that. So it's a good deal, but it is something the Cowboys fans should at least have the awareness that there are some challenges here, and the Cowboys are aware of those, and they're willing to take those on.
Well, and speaking to that, I did talk to one of my Cowboy sources specifically about what was it about Everson that you liked. And I was basically told, look, there's a couple of things that they love about him, and I'll read it out. They've had their eye on him for a while. The conversations have been ongoing. They graded him out when he was a free agent. Adds another difference-making pass rusher that plays all three downs, high motor, loves football. And I think that's important. That's an important distinction, because we've seen guys in Dallas that don't love football. Mm-hmm. And to your Alden Smith point, I think what the Cowboys have done, they've rolled the dice on. We've seen the Rolando McClain thing not work out. And, even the Randy Gregory experiment, you could argue, didn't work out for them. But I don't think you could ever dispute that Randy loves football. You and I
Sure.
have talked to Randy. There are some legitimate anxiety and personal issues that he coped with, something that they've, if we want to call it for lack of a better word, decriminalized in the NFL, which is the marijuana policy. So you and I have kept our eye on that situation. I think you and I, wouldn't you say, are pretty optimistic that we're going to see Randy Gregory back this year? Yeah. No, I think I think that's a good bet. I think that, he's in a good space mentally. And I think, outside of just what we hear, you see, other colleagues like Calvin Watkins reporting that, he's talking to people who are saying the Cowboys are optimistic he's going to get it if he just, remains patient and prepares for the season the right way. And I think that, he's been doing that. He's been working out. He's been doing, a lot of things off the field to make sure that he's where he needs to be, both, I think, mentally and what he does off the field, and also making sure that he's prepared for when the call comes and he's ready to go out there. But certainly, if you're able to get Randy Gregory back and you've got Alden Smith at even, half of what he was at his peak when he was with the 49ers, and then you've got Gerald McCoy and Don Terry Poe, two former Pro Bowlers, DeMarcus Lawrence, who you've invested a lot in. You've drafted Neville Gallimore, a guy you had a higher grade on than where you picked him. And now you're adding a guy like, Everson Griffen here. It's been a pretty savvy year for the Cowboys in terms of replenishing what they lost. Even in losing Robert Quinn the way they did, they're probably in line for a third or fourth round comp pick. So they picked up a draft pick, probably replaced closely the production with Everson Griffen stepping in for Robert Quinn. And so I think in general, it's been a really successful offseason, and the Cowboys hope that can continue to build and continue to, lather icing on the cake if Randy Gregory is able to come back. And so exciting to finally be able to watch practice this week. And so we'll be able to start digging into some of these position battles. A question that I asked, if you're listening to the State of the Union address, a little tricky to get questions in. Obviously, all of us chomping at the bit to ask McCarthy, Jerry, who we have not heard from in months, remarkably a man that is typically very present as it relates to topics and issues that relate to the NFL, especially when the NFL is looking for a level of optimism. Normally Jerry's there. Haven't heard from Jerry. Mm-hmm. I do believe, because this is Jerry, he talked about rabbit ears and he's listening. And, he once talked about how he literally is going down there and talking to the guy that's getting the garbage and the guy that's, selling his Pepsi drinks at the start. He literally is constantly getting input. I think that's what makes him I've long joked that he is the Imagineer. He's the Walt Disney of the NFL. And so I think he has wisely stepped back and used those rabbit ears to sort of collect information this offseason. But yeah, all of us reporters stepping on each other, just trying to ask a number of questions. And there weren't many football questions that were asked, admittedly. I tried. No such luck. But I digress. We'll be able to start looking at some of these position battles, obviously starting Friday and then really digging into it. Third week is when they're allowed to get into pads. So right now it's going to be shells and helmets. So still a little far away from seeing actual physical contact. If you haven't watched Hard Knocks, by the way, on HBO, I tried to explain to friends and family what the dynamic at practice looks like and the COVID protocols and what even us and the media are going through. It is a fascinating behind the scenes look of what's going on because we are only allowed to shoot 15 minutes of it. We'll obviously be able to be there for the 2 hours of practice, but no video. It's not going to be a training camp like we typically have out in Oxnard at NFL Network where we're doing live look-ins and we're showing you the bull in the ring or the wide receiver battles, which I loved. My favorite battles are always the wide receivers and the corners, and how fun this year have been to watch the wide receivers and the corners. But just going back to the defensive line, that's going to be fun to watch because at right end, we're talking Everson Griffen, Tyrone Crawford when he comes back from his injury, Dontaria Poe, Antoine Woods at your nose tackle, 3 technique, Gerald McCoy, and as you said, Neville Gallimore. Left end, DeMarcus Lawrence, and then for your defensive pass rushers, Alton Smith and Jalen Smith. Not bad. I mean, we've been talking so much about this offense and the depth that they've got, which, by the way, also, Bobby, we got Mike McCarthy to at least say Joe Looney, center, not a big shock there. Connor Williams coming back from an injury, and Connor McGovern at left guard. So we'll be able to give you a little bit more of those eyes and ears as practice gets underway. But yeah, I'm personally ready to watch football. What are some of the position battles you're looking forward to? What do you think? We just talked about offense and the depth, and now this defensive line. You think safety, corner still questions for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, when you look at the fact that Byron Jones is gone now and they've got a guy in their secondary, you look at their corners of, Cheeto and Jordan Lewis and Anthony Brown, and yet they used 2 of their first 4 picks in the draft on cornerbacks. So they're clearly not totally sold on what they have at corner. There seems to be some discussion about, maybe Cheeto would do some work at safety like he did at Colorado and become sort of more a position flex guy. And they brought in Darryl Worley, who has some experience playing both sides. And so that's really unsettled. I'm going to be interested to see where guys are lining up there and where they stack up on the depth chart. I'll be interested to see how Jalen Smith and Leighton Vander Esch are just moving at linebacker after, Leighton missed most of last year and Jalen seemed to kind of regress and have some issues with his sideline to sideline and lateral movement. So that'll be really interesting. I'm interested in reference to the defensive line.
Real quick, Bobby, for people that are kind of curious what that's going to look like with Leighton doing a little bit more of the rushing at that Mike position. Remember Ron Slavin, who we've had on our show, Leighton Vander Esch's agent, and I think even Leighton addressed this a little bit. Go put in the tape of Cowboys versus Saints at home. Cowboys, of course, won that game. It was a big shocker in the Saints season. He was flying all over the football field. That'll give you sort of an indication of him playing a little bit more loose, what that's going to look like. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think gives you kind of a better idea of what they mean by multiple, the way they presented the defense that day. And if you look at like New England and some of these other teams, that the way they play defense, it's sort of the same way that, they're going to want to try. And we've heard a little bit of discussion about how there was kind of the, as much as the criticism on the offense was, we just present it for you and we're going to line up and beat you and we're not going to try and trick you. That seemed to kind of be a criticism coming out of last year about the defense, that, we heard about corners being frustrated about the type of press coverage they were allowed to play and what they were allowed to show. And so I think that, that's going to be a change this year with Mike Nolan and some of the other people coming in here, that they're going to look to change that up a little bit. I am interested that, when you ran through the list of defensive linemen there, one guy you didn't mention was Tristan Hill. And this is a new coaching staff here. I'm just saying it's fascinating that I think we could be walking into a training camp here
Charlton moment.
Where after 1 year, your second round pick is potentially on the bubble. that this is, there's no guarantees that he's going to be here on the 53-man roster when the season begins. And so that also speaks to the type of talent they've stacked up there, that's even a question. Because I think in years past, you've kind of said, well, it's so thin, it doesn't matter that they're necessarily performing. We're keeping them anyway. But a lot of interesting things, I think, on the defensive side of the football, and interested to see kind of how things play out there at left guard and center and some of those things.
I'm so proud of your maturity, not going there and killing these young kids.
I'm not.
Sometimes I have to come at you because I see what you put on Twitter, Bobby, and I love it. You take these emotional positions. You are, of course, the president of the Dak Prescott fan club, which I appreciate.
I am.
I wish I was as passionate. The only thing that I can possibly equate similar passion to is my love of Taylor Swift.
I'm sorry.
I am Team Taylor. I think that's pretty clear now, but I appreciate your passion. But you certainly buried Taco Charlton back in the day, and I was waiting for you to bury sweet Tristan Hill.
Can I say,
like low-hanging fruit.
Let me tell you about, this is actually a good story about where I hopefully have matured some. And I remember I actually had this conversation with somebody with the Cowboys, that we were having this talk about how I had been critical of Taco. And then I realized, I got to kind of pull back. I'm being way too aggressive here. And, they kind of pointed out to me that, maybe he does have rabbit ears. Maybe he hears too much. Maybe he searches his own name. Maybe he sees those things. But at that point, if you know that, there is a little bit of a responsibility that shifts to you and the way you talk about him and the way that you affect his confidence and the way that you talk about him. And that isn't necessary to kind of dogpile onto a guy when you know he does have those rabbit ears. It's his responsibility to try and block out the noise as best as possible, but don't just throw out the noise for him to have to block out. Just be fair about it. And that was a conversation I had a couple years ago, and I was like, you know what, that's fair. And I do need to be better. And I feel like hopefully since that conversation been better about not just teeing off on guys.
But that's what I love about you is you are a football fan first, and your passion shows. But now, remember, I appreciate that you're finding a little objectivity in your evaluation of these young guys.
Yes.
Speaking of Dak, I've said this from day one. I will never forget my first conversation with Dak. It was on the football field in Oxnard, right after Kellen Moore had gotten hurt, after Tony Romo had gotten hurt, and him talking about, I'm a big fan of vision boards and manifestation. I love The Secret. I love if you visualize it, it will happen. If you believe it, you'll succeed at it. And that has been Dak. I mean, he talked about, even as a rookie, laying in his bed at night and going over the plays in his head. Everyone gives him so much angst with the torque twist on the football field. I mean, everything he does is very deliberate, his preparation. The guy went out and talked to us about, his dream was to always have a football field. And without saying it, he's very diplomatic for a young age. And I thought Jerry hit the nail on the head when he said, to paraphrase, this is one of the most mature young guys that he's been around. I feel the same way about him. And to be fair, he's been through a lot at a young age with the death of his mother and, of course, the loss of his brother this summer, which was awful. And if you were following the presser, you saw he had a hard time keeping it together. He doesn't show a lot of emotion. That was a hard one for me to watch. But just the way that he compartmentalizes things, the way he handles himself. And if you missed the presser, I think a lot of people have wanted to know, Dak, you didn't get the contract done. Stephen Jones conceded. They talked the deadline, as I had reported, after those conversations had failed. Here's what he had to say about the way he's approaching this season and the fact that contract didn't get done.
Business is business, and once I'm in the locker room and part of this, a part of what's going on now, I don't focus too much about the future, just more about today. And so with that being said, I'm excited as hell to be a Dallas Cowboy. I've been a fan of this organization and been a fan of this program for years. I love every bit of the opportunity and the platform that I get to be the quarterback here. I love this team. I'm excited about what we have, what we can do and accomplish this year. So no frustration as far as that. Once again, I believe something will get done, and with my hopes, I believe I'll be a Dallas Cowboy for the rest of my career. So
the other thing that stood out for me, Bobby, was I don't know if he was throwing shade, because I know that Dak was and is a fan of Jason Garrett.
Yeah.
A lot of people took it that way. I'm going to play this clip for you. And I want your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely different, but different's good at times, and I think it is here. I mean, he's done a great job of coming in and bringing some of his tools and or a lot of his knowledge to this offense, and just, I mean, he's a very, very genuine guy, and I think that's the first thing that hit off with the team. When he got in front of the team and he walks around the building, as you feel it, when he talks, you hear it, and then you see it just in his actions. So, I mean, I think that's huge. When you're coaching a football team and when you're being a leader, to be genuine like that, and to be transparent, and that's the way he's been. But his knowledge and the way he can help this offense and the way that he can allow me to grow as a quarterback, knowing all the guys he's coached before, it's nothing but excitement coming from my end, and I know a lot of the guys in this locker room.
If I know Dak, Bobby, that wasn't so much Jason Garrett didn't make the team smart about football. That was him taking ownership of, as a collective group, they've had their moments. I could be wrong.
No, I think you're right. And I think generally Dak is generally going to be as fair as he possibly can. You know, he's not going to lay it all out on the line. We've heard internally from players that, like, you know, the guy at practice, the guy who holds you accountable and is commanding the room, he's a different guy there than he is in front of us when he stands up there and he's being the diplomat. And so I think that I don't think there's any doubt he respects Jason Garrett. He thinks highly of Jason Garrett. I think in a lot of ways they are very similar in their mindset in terms of how to approach football, how to approach the media, how to approach being a Dallas Cowboy. And so I think he does have a lot of respect for him, but I think he also is aware enough to notice where faults were with the last regime. And even if he is a fan of them, I think it's, you know, this is something that's improved. This is something that's better. And so I don't think it's shade as much as it's just trying to give an honest evaluation of where things were and how things are different.
And I thought what was really interesting is they haven't spent a lot of time talking. And I even addressed this with Mike in our very first sit down when he took the job, because he spent so much time with Aaron Rodgers in the offseason because the CBA allowed that. It simply is not the case anymore. I mean, I guess you could, in theory, you know, instead of going to Duke basketball games with your head coach, you could go watch film and keep it on the DL, I suppose. A lot of things just weren't working for Mike this offseason with COVID and the holdout. And so I think that it's fascinating, the situation they all find themselves in. But I got the sense that in their limited time together, and maybe it's the resume and the skins on the wall, but just his reverence for Mike already and the way he commands a room. Look, even as a reporter, you and I have talked about this. I love it. Like, he sort of commands your respect. Mike, not saying that Jason didn't. There's just this air about him. And maybe, that, like I said, that comes with having skins on the wall. But it is, when Dak said they are different, I didn't take it as shade. It's just they are.
Yeah, I think it's just an honest assessment. I think both of them are very big on discipline and being disciplined. I just think they have different ways of going about it. Jason Garrett, enforced discipline with routine and consistency, and that was his thing. And I think that it's just Mike McCarthy's way of enforcing discipline seems to be a little more kind of, drill sergeant, a little more, tough love. And so I think that that's just different ways to reach what ultimately is a similar philosophy and a similar end goal for the two of them. And I think that's the thing. I don't think the Cowboys organization-wide wanted to necessarily change a lot of their philosophies, in terms of how this team is supposed to operate and what it means to be a Dallas Cowboy. I think they still want that same reverence. They still want the same sort of, messaging about fight and, and those sort of things. And the have respect for what it means to be a Dallas Cowboy. I just think they looked at it as logistically the ways that we get to that end goal need to change. We need to find somebody else's method of reaching that philosophy.
I thought was interesting too, the terminology, and even Dak saying he's guys communicating all the same way. That was interesting. And for, people who question Dak's commitment, the fact that he was able to galvanize all these guys at his house to work on the timing. This is a guy that's ready. This is a guy that stays ready. And more importantly, Dak Prescott talking about 90% of this team doing what the Saints did, which was, I'm surprised the league didn't try to do this altogether. But as Dak explains it, trying to make sure that the healthiest team does in fact win.
Yeah, I'm already there. As I said, for me, it's about trying to stay as safe as I can, as healthy as I can. Without knowing the true future of where this season is going to go, I think it's important for us as players to try to create the biggest bubble or the smallest bubble, I guess you can say, but a bubble that we can amongst players, because as long as this season gets to play out, I think part of it, the healthiest team wins. So that's something that we've come together as leaders and taken on this option to stay in this hotel just as that. So we can try to stay healthy. We can all be there for each other. We can set an example for the young guys about avoiding downtown or about avoiding the other people and where people can go. Because what's important right now is this football team, the season, and not only our health, but the health of our families. So I think this is the best way that we can make sure that happens.
So 90% of the team in the bubble, obviously you've got guys, I would imagine DeMarcus Lawrence probably isn't in that bubble. He's got a baby on the way here in October. He might be there for a little bit. I think there's a couple of other guys on the team that have got kids on the way. And so, of course, you need to be there to help your wife or your significant other. You know, Jordan Lewis has got a new child. Again, I'd love to ask a lot of these questions, Bobby. We haven't had a lot of access to them. And quite frankly, I don't know if there's some mandate to not talk to the media. It's one voice, one new regime. I haven't heard from a lot of these guys back. So typically, I think that's a good thing for the fans as a reporter.
Sure.
A little frustrating.
Yeah, no, and I mean, undoubtedly, probably swamped in a lot of, logistical catch-up that they missed over the summer. And so it's almost like I don't even have time to pick up my phone and look at this right now. But, yeah, I think a lot of it also is I think there's probably a renewed focus for teams across the league on secrecy and not tipping your hand and things like that. And because I think that this is such a bizarre year that teams are going to look for any sort of advantage they can have, psychologically or as, in terms of X's and O's, since everybody's going to be at sort of a disadvantage physically this year with, the reps that they normally get over the summer disappearing and not being able to prepare the way they normally would.
How about, we've talked about the Saints being the class of the NFC just because of the continuity with the coaching staff and the players. And then, of course, you've got the X factor of Tom Brady with Tampa. How about the fact that you're removing what I think is one of the biggest things for the Saints, fans in the Superdome? They're not opening up their season without fans.
Yeah.
I'm a little shocked by that.
Yeah, I mean, that was, and obviously, I think everybody is dealing with it a little differently. New Orleans, I know, was a hot spot at one point of COVID infections. And, Jerry talked about it, and we can play this clip here in a sec, but Jerry talked about, some of the benefits they have with ventilation and the way their, stadium works that maybe the Superdome doesn't have. And that's the difference with the Superdome is you're packing in all these people and making it as loud and as raucous as you can, and then you're capping it. And there's nowhere for that to go necessarily if you're having all those people, projecting and cheering and such. But, a little surprised that New Orleans wouldn't look to kind of maintain that benefit a little bit. And, Dallas, we saw a laundry list of things they released this week and protocols that they're going to be practicing. But, I mean, they seem pretty committed that they're ready to, approach the season with fans in the stands.
Defiant, in fact. Here's Jerry Jones talking about that.
When we sit down and think about football, you're talking to a biased person regarding what football does. You take most things away from me if you say it's not important. John Madden and I, after a ball game where he was the commentator, went to his room and about 15, 20 years ago, and we were sitting there and I was feeling good. We'd gotten a win, and I said, John, am I just completely blown out of proportion? Is this as big a deal as I've got it blown up to be? And of course, John said, Jerry, it's as big a deal. Our country really is and does place football, whether it's misplaced or not, at a very high level. Consequently, to answer your question, it is important. I think it is important individually, but I think it is important in the country. I know the debate going on. I can easily see how X percent of the people would be for it's just not worth the kinds of effort, risk, whatever that's going to go on. I believe it is. The NFL can be an exciting when I say exciting, it can be an inspirational part of how we address COVID, not only the remainder of this year, but as we go into 21. So it's a big enough deal for me to look at costs in every way. And obviously costs usually are associated with financial. But it's easy for me to justify for the long term of interest in football and the long-term thing that competitive sports bring to the table and what it can bring to the country. It's worth it to make the effort for us to have a complete season, and I want to do it in front of our fans.
All right, to that end, you would reference this, the list that finally came out, just to get a sense of what it's going to look like at AT&T Stadium, because I've had my question. I saw Texas and OU are playing at Cotton Bowl, so I'm like, how many fans? Because we're not going to have a fair this year. So let me get this straight. We can't have the fair, but we can have, what, 25%, 50% capacity at the Cotton Bowl? Sure, that sounds great.
Yeah. So
limited stadium capacity. Jerry, I love that Jerry kept digging in on this. They've got 3 million square feet at AT&T Stadium, and it sounded like he was going to use all of that to his advantage as it applies to whatever it's going to be, 25 or 50%. Yep. With 15 dedicated entries and exits, in addition to the 3 million square feet of club concourse and corridor space. I mean, every nook and cranny, weather permitting, AT&T Stadium's unique retractable roof and end zone door gives the ability to maximize fresh airflow throughout the building, along with the capacity of circulating 840,000 cubic feet per minute of fresh air through its mechanical system. If you haven't been in the suite life, they pump Vegas type air through there. You know, when you're in Vegas and you have that sweet aroma and you feel alive, mm-hmm. That's what they pump through there. Sometimes I just like to get a whiff of it and feel rich. Mask policy. Of course, you're going to have to wear a mask. Seating, the tickets will be distributed. This is what I loved. Seat blocks known as pods. So to maintain distance between groups who are not known to one another, this is great. Fans are required to maintain pod integrity by only transferring tickets to family or friends within their trusted group. Each ticket holder should have their own mobile ticket on their device, taking me into mobile-only ticketing, cashless experience, so debit cards, no cash allowed, frictionless entry. So in other words, they will go through a frictionless security scan, usually 60 socially distanced metal detectors to enter AT&T Stadium. And then they're going to tailgating, designated spaces, one space between vehicles is going to be required. And then stadium cleaning, they're going to do all the disinfecting, which again, go watch Real Sports on HBO. Fascinating. They created an entire practice facility. And it's like a Super Bowl party tent with turf and 2 football fields. They essentially did what we've seen out in Oxnard, but they did it close to the facility. So,
well, I got to say, frictionless entry is going to be one of my new favorite terms.
Can we do that at the airport?
Frictionless entry. Yeah, I like that. I want to get that. I'm going to use that hashtag from now on. Hashtag frictionless entry.
One other thing that I think was, as we talk about social justice and how they're going to handle the anthem. Jerry was incredibly quiet on that. I tell a story of Monday Night Football in Arizona, telling Jerry 13-year players are going to take a knee. And I have a picture of it. I'll never forget the day. It was me and Todd Archer went over there of ESPN, and he was incredulous. Next thing I know, he goes and he talks to Steven and Charlotte, and it's my understanding he went in the locker room, and that's where they came up with the take a knee, back up, and stand for the national anthem, hand over heart, and they got booed. They get stuck at the elevator, and Jerry, Steve, the whole brain trust is on their phones, just sort of gauging public interest. And at that time, Arizona, I never realized how conservative Phoenix was, by the way. It was an interesting time.
It's the home of Barry Goldwater.
Yeah, it was a very interesting time. I guess so close to California, I just assumed it was a lot more liberal. No. So it was right after that it was toeing the line. And so, well, we'll play the clip. Jerry, on Grace.
Well, everybody in this country knows where I stand and where the Cowboys stand when it comes to the flag. Millions of people, that represents so much of what's in the past in their lives, whether it's losing loved ones or whether it be an immigrant. that came over to America and made his way and fought and fought and fought and created a life we're here today. So we all understand, and everybody understands where I stand with the flag. But everybody also understands where I stand on backing our players, the Dallas Cowboy players. My greatest fear, frankly, is because 2 years ago, when this was a focal point issue at the time, standing or kneeling, 2 years ago, our players, we all came together, and we had many on that team that were thinking about one way and many, many others that were thinking about another way. And I asked them to look at it from the standpoint of not only team, but look at it from the standpoint of the uniqueness of what we can do with the Dallas Cowboys. We basically came up with a way that we would stand. We came up with a way that we would go forward. The team selected leadership. They met with judges, many judges. They interviewed those judges. The judges interviewed the players. Our players went on with police and went out on patrol and went out and were involved when police duty were being performed to get a better understanding from that. And they did commit with everything that we could do to give them support. I'm talking about the Dallas Cowboys. And we basically spoke to this when the issue was really at the forefront just a few months back. And we spoke to this. And consequently, I'm so proud of how our players addressed that at the time. And that was our statement because we had it. We had many examples that we could present in programs about where we stand regarding social justice at that time. That was then, and that's how we reacted then. I'm so proud of Dak the other day. He made a plea to the governor of Oklahoma. Those are the active aspects of being to address and help the issue of social justice. I'm so proud for the Dallas Cowboys and proud of Dak for taking that stance. I don't speak for him. He's going to be on here later today, and he'll speak for himself in this area. But those are areas of doing something about it. The key word about your question, David, is a word called grace. Grace. That was then 2 years ago. This is now. We have had very sensitive times. I don't need to share that we're also embroiled in a very other sensitive time with the challenge and the war literally we're on with the virus. These are very sensitive times. I have nothing to prove as far as where I'm standing with the flag and where the Cowboys stand. I have nothing to prove regarding my players and my support of our players. What I do want to show and want us all to be a part of is a word called grace. Grace. Not only grace in our actions, but grace in our understanding where they're coming from. I want our players to understand the perception and where they're coming from regarding the flag and the sensitivity there and the many memories there. And I want our fans to understand and better do because of what's gone on over the last few months. And want them to understand where our players are coming from there. And they do not feel like that the ones that want to basically do that, kneel, they do not feel like they're dishonoring the flag. I'm going to have grace. I've had grace. Many of you have written and criticized me for having too much grace and understanding regarding our players, and I probably have. And I'm going to have grace regarding the people that are sensitive about our flag. Somewhere in between there, as the weeks, as we get together with our team, as we discuss with the team, somewhere in between there is how we're going to handle it.
So a lot of people were knocking Jerry for this. I don't know if you follow Jean-Jacques Taylor.
I do not.
Jean took exception with this.
I'll tell you a story about that later.
So Jean-Jacques Taylor is on 103.3 ESPN here, and he took exception with it, and far be it for me to negate this coming from a black man, but his issue with the word grace was how it's defined. And I'm trying to find the tweet. Oh, here we go. He writes in his tweet, read the definitions. This is why grace to me was a poor word choice, as Jerry talked about players taking a knee during the anthem. Favor or goodwill, a manifestation of a favor, especially by a superior, mercy, clemency, pardon. So I think we can read between the lines of his thoughts on grace. Here's what I'm prepared to give Jerry the benefit of the doubt, because Jerry talks about it all the time, that he's a man that's made mistakes, and he likes to give people second chances, because, I mean, we saw that with Michael Irvin through and through. We're seeing that with Randy Gregory. Go to Ezekiel Elliott, for that matter. I mean, go down the list. So I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt there, because I truly believe, and as he stated, he wants grace in people understanding why people are kneeling, and he admitted that things have changed. In other words, the players have said, which is, over 80% of your league, black players, we're not okay with this. This is important to us. I agree. I think what he's saying by grace is he's managing not only some of the sponsors who took issue with it, but the football fan who turned away from the game as a result of it. I've got friends and family who've said they're not going to watch football if players take any. And we've talked about the dynamics of politics in my family. You want it, we've got it. There's actually a really interesting article about my dad's side of the family growing up, that there's 6 kids in his family, and all of them practice different religions.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's kind of interesting.
Goodness.
So, we always have very robust family discussions. Just got an interesting text. I don't know what I can say here.
Well, while you evaluate that text, I think it's important. You just referenced the religion there, and you talk about race. Jerry said that. Dak spoke later, and Dak actually had a really good statement, I thought, when he came down to, they asked him, what type of conversations are going on about how you guys are going to handle these protests, and this is what he had to say.
As a football team, you want to represent one group, and I think that's the best part about football, is it represents, in a sense, the country. Different people from different economic backgrounds, different social backgrounds, different beliefs, religion, color. Any way you think of it, a football team has everybody compiled of all kind of different places and backgrounds that they come from, but we all come together for one common goal, and that's to support each other and to go win. So, I mean, I think in anything that we do, we want to kind of represent how we can come together and how we can be as one, and that's what this country needs to be right now. And I think that's what everybody is seeing. It's seeing with the world we're in and the crisis that we have going on right now in our country. So hopefully we can do something all together. But then again, I think this time is more important to listen and not to be personally saying your opinion and personally saying your thoughts, because you have to be able to relate to somebody else's perspective and understand where they come from and understand the differences that you have and that they have. And so it would also be tough just to say that you don't understand why somebody wants to be different and do something that represents their family and represents where they come from and represents their belief. So,
yeah, Dak just incredibly impressive in everything he does. I thought it was incredibly thoughtful response. And as I was, as one guy joked, take a breath, I was short forming the presser because just so excited to talk football with everyone. I didn't want to paraphrase anything that Dak was saying just because I thought it was so thoughtful and speaks to just who he is. I mean, look, I don't think you should give a guy a contract because he's a good guy or he makes your franchise look good. I mean, if that was the case, we would have paid Sean Lee top of the market money, right?
Or Josh McCown or somebody like that.
Great example. But I do believe that you've got a lot of stuff there with Dak that certainly, and as they spoke to it too, there's a real hope that they're able to get a long-term deal done. I would certainly hate to see them move on from Dak because I think he's got the respect of that locker room. We see it from the guys who won't even comment on his contract negotiations, how he feels. They are just incredibly protective of their guy, and we haven't always seen that with quarterbacks in Dallas.
No, we have not. And I think it is important that, like you say, you don't want to just pay a guy necessarily because he's a good guy, but as, somebody once told me with the Cowboys that, there's something different about being the quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys. There's something different in every locker room about being the quarterback, but being the quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys you're expected to speak on everything. You're expected to touch on everything. You have to have a good answer for everything. It can't just be, passing the buck off. And you're expected to be a certain type of leader. And I think that's the thing, is that you've heard consistently from guys, is that when he stepped onto the field and took over even as a rookie, he always had that command. And that's what I think is most special to people who watch him, is the type of leader that he is. And, it helps that he's a top quarterback to boot. But the mental makeup is a big, big part of why he is uniquely equipped to be quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys.
So I didn't want to be rude there, Bobby, but I've been working on a story throughout the day. I don't know if you saw our boy Dez texting.
I did. I saw Dez tweeting that he had, all he said was something like, "Got good news," or something like that.
Thanks, Dez, because I was mid-plank in my yoga class and running that down. Here's what I'll say. There are people being very coy about this right now, but he's got to work out. I can't tell you who it's with. I can't tell you when it is, but he's got to work out. So we'll see how this goes for Dez.
Say it's the Philadelphia Eagles, just to get everybody all worked up.
I can tell you that it is not the Philadelphia Eagles.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, you guys guessed with the 31 other teams then.
Yes. But I think a lot of people were waiting. Obviously, you're allowed to have 16 people on your practice squad as a result of COVID. You've got opt-outs. There is a need there. I do think there's a lot of questions about Dez as it relates to the injury and where he's at. His videos certainly show that he has looked leaner. He has put in the work.
Well, we saw him up close. We saw he looked in better shape than he did, a year ago.
Yeah, and here's what I'll also say about Dez. Dez has been out there hustling for himself. In other words, he's been reaching out to people in a decision-making department to try and get for himself. So I like to see people who do the work.
Which can I say, I don't want somebody to twist that. You point out that he is reaching out. I don't want somebody to listen to that and go like, oh, how sad. He's got to go out and reach out on his own. Let me tell you guys, it happens so much more often than that, like, people call in and reach out to certain individuals to try and make things happen. I don't know if people remember. That's how DeMarco Murray got his contract in Philadelphia. He wasn't getting the offers he wanted.
I'm not sitting around waiting for my agent to go get me jobs. I'm putting myself out there. Your agent's job is to help you negotiate the best money possible and look at your contract and look over your interests should that contract be breached or there's a conflict of interest. But
you'll generate those leads, damn it.
Yes, I will. I always have. Shout out to Jim Ornstein, though, amazing agent at William Morris. But I know a lot of people have sort of joked about the Dez comeback. And look, it's just a workout at this point. But I do think, and I know, because I've talked to teams, that there has at least been, they're looking over, we're talking about teams that are looking at college tape as it relates to how does this player look. You weren't able to bring in undrafted free agents or free agents during COVID. So it's not surprising that there are at least teams going, this is interesting. What I'll say, though, and especially as this relates to else, I've had at least 2 coaches tell me that when a player's out, it is really hard to come back in. The odds are stacked against Dez in that respect, and Antonio Brown for that matter. What's interesting is that people still will give Antonio Brown the looks when he's got all these pending legal matters and suspensions, but everyone sort of rolls their eyes at Dez. And maybe I'm not objective because I've been involved with, Dez trying to come back. And I will just say this, mentally, he seems like the place ever, and he's been consistently putting in the work. We've talked to David Robinson before. I think David's been good for him. David has made him work on his mechanics. David has made him show up to practice.
David keeps him honest. David will stay on top of, and Dez has said this, that David gets him going on the days he doesn't want to get going. David gets him out. And so, and that's not, there are lots of guys who don't want to go do their workouts on certain days. So that's not unusual. What you need in your life is somebody who can pull you out on those days where you don't want to. And that's the thing that, Dez has gotten with David. It's something Dez told us he got. We'll talk to Bobby Stroupe from APEC here in a second. Something he said he got with Bobby, that Bobby's able to pull him out on those sorts of days. And so that's the thing. I think it's good that when everything ended in Dallas, Dez talked about how he kind of isolated and kind of just decided to go off and deal with things. And I think that's the thing. I don't think he had that circle necessarily that was encouraging him of, come on, let's get out here. I know you don't want to, but it's time. And that's the difference, I think, this time around is he does have that right now, the people that are motivating him on the days he's not necessarily motivated himself to go out there.
And look, he addressed this with us in our podcast a few months back. He was not in a good place. The texts just keep coming in, Bobby.
You want to do a plank while you're doing this?
Yeah, well.
Knock those out?
News never stops.
No, like you said, he said to us he wasn't necessarily in a good place, and that, you know, you didn't want the Dez Bryant. You know, he says that, you know, teams didn't want Dez Bryant back then. Even if they thought they didn't want that version of Dez. This is the version of Dez he says that they would want, is the one that's ready to go out there and is hungry and is ready to compete. You know, again, like I said, we'll talk to Bobby Stroupe here. It's like Bobby said, that's one of the things that he loves about when Dez is in there working out, is that he brings such a great contagious energy for other people, and that they want to push themselves, and you know, they feel, you know, more energized and are able to power through those workouts because of that energy that he brings in there. And so when you get Dez in the right state of mind and you get that Dez Bryant energy just right, you know, it allows for good things to happen.
I want to see Dez succeed, but I think for Dez to succeed, he needs to go to a team where he is not going to be wide receiver 1 or 2. He needs to literally be a third option, a red zone threat. He needs a disciplinarian type coach that's going to hold him accountable, make him show up on time, go to the treatment. And I think it would behoove him for it to be a place where it's away from Texas. In other words, it's just Dez and his teammates, no distractions.
So what you're saying is Jason Garrett and the New York Giants is where Dez is heading?
Yeah. I don't know.
No? Okay. No? Okay.
Yeah. So we'll see. Which is a perfect segue for us to talk to a guy that's actually seen Dez in motion, Bobby Stroupe.
Joining us now is Bobby Stroupe. He is the president of APEC, one of the top training facilities for athletes in the country. You can follow him on Twitter at Bobby Stroupe, and we're going to talk to him today about a lot of different things. He's got his hand in, you know, a lot of places and has a lot of knowledge, and we're excited to talk to him. Bobby, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm a big fan of both of you, and Jay and I even have some Tyler, Texas connections. So
we haven't covered that. So I worked at CBS 19 in Tyler. What is the tie-in there?
I mean, I don't know. I was, you know, they talk about journeyman quarterbacks, but I was a young man out and about. I have no idea. Hopefully we never cross paths out at the pub or wherever else.
Jack's on the Square was one of my favorites. It had the Twizzler martinis, which was always fun. It is a small town, so I'm actually surprised that I never ran into you. Of course, I was dating and then later married to the sports director. So
okay.
Us news people sort of stuck together. But as I learned, you don't marry people in the business, Bobby. I digress. Before we brought you on, we were talking about Dez. I had stated Dez has a workout, and I think it makes sense given that people are able to expand their practice squads with COVID and the opt-outs, that you just want to be able to at least evaluate a player right now in the event you've got a player down and you need to bring – I mean, staffs are literally turning over, I think, every rock. I mean, we've even heard in Dallas they're looking at college tape as it relates to some of their younger players. You've seen Dez in action when he was out there working out with Patrick Mahomes. You see a lot of players in action. What was your honest impression of Dez Bryant?
I think early in the offseason, his body still needed a lot of work. You know, his ankle and some other things. He had no injuries. It was just there was a gap there. But as the offseason went on, he was steady. He did great work with David. He was consistent. He dropped, I want to say, around 14 pounds total. And wow. You can see on the videos, I mean, he's moving a lot better. He's moving cleanly. His routes are as good as they've ever been. And most importantly, he had a real focus and just an energy about him that, you know, I didn't know Dez before, but it was new to me, that the experience of seeing that with him. And you could tell how much he loves the game of football and how passionate he is about it right now. So that was what stuck out to me, is how serious he is about this, how much he loves the game. And of course, the thing that's always made him special in the field is his incredible ball skills, which I was able to witness, and, his passion for the game. Even out there just working out, he's pouring into these young kids and teaching, and it was a cool thing to see.
Now, Bobby, I don't know if you're a golfer, but I've taken it up pretty aggressively the last 2 years. And when I post videos of my golf swing, it's my best stuff. We see a lot of Dez's stuff on Instagram and Twitter. Is that a fair representation of what you were seeing with him and Patrick Mahomes?
Yeah. I mean, it is what it is. And I think Dez has been pretty consistent about just putting out there whatever it is that day. I don't think he's filtering through it too much. And you can see marked improvement. If you go back and look early in January, and then all the way through now, you can see improvement with his body, the way he moves, his kinesthetic awareness, his balance, his ability to push off from the right to the left to the right, to be able to stop on a dime, come back to the ball and track it. He's really improved, and his body continues to improve. And I've been impressed with this consistent positivity and just love for the game. And he's serious about it, and he's never had a doubt that he's going to get this opportunity.
He does have this ability to manifest and will himself when other people literally stack the cards against him. I never count him out, so to put the Dez discussion to rest, because I know people sort of laugh when Bobby and I talk about it because we talk about him a lot. He certainly deserves a second chance, or at least the workout like that I said that he's getting in, and hopefully that works out for him.
Absolutely. I think we all know he's a difficult matchup on third down, short, difficult around the goal line. He's got great ball skills, and that body's a difficult one to defend. I mean, he's one of a kind and has a lot of records, and is thought of that way for a reason.
Well, and one of the things that, Bobby, you do a lot of stuff there. I know you train guys before the draft. You don't just train football players. You do a lot with Major League Baseball players. Trevor Story, I know, is a guy who's worked with you a lot. You obviously work with Patrick Mahomes. He's always out there, coming out there during the offseason and putting in his work. But one of the things that, outside of just the draft work that you've done, how unique has it been during the COVID process where guys aren't necessarily – they haven't been able to be at their facilities or be out there. How much have they been coming to you and trying to get their preparation ready? And how is that different, pre-draft training versus trying to help guys get ready for the season when they don't have their practice facility to go to?
Yeah, so when all this hit, I think everyone had their own personal disasters. For us, we were finishing up draft preparation, and a lot of these athletes didn't have pro days to finish. And the Thursday, on Wednesday at 5 p.m., we got shut down. That Thursday morning, we had former scouts flying in. I talked to 2 GMs about camera angles, exactly what they wanted. And I couldn't get the city of Fort Worth to give me 12 more hours to finish it up. And I understand. But we were threatened, and it was tough. And that cost a lot of kids an opportunity to put, official numbers out there. And as you know, that can be a problem for some people. Maybe that's a help, but for us, that was something that hurt. It hurt because we wanted it for a lot of those athletes and kids that have worked so hard and improved. And so I think that's difficult. One of the advantages we had and some of our athletes had is we already have a private virtual platform that we use because we do a lot of consulting around the world. We only have 2 locations, so we send out a lot. And we were able to, on the next day, provide our athletes with something tangible that has videos of every exercise. They can put in input, and we can track actually how much time they look at each exercise and how long they've been on the app that day per workout, and so on and so forth. So there's some accountability measures there and some things that they had at their disposal immediately. But I think in an event like this, professionals are exposed. So professionalism is exposed. So the professionalism that you have is going to either rise you up or it's going to drop you down. And I think that you're going to see that with a lot of the rookies that really didn't know what it took to play at this level from a preparation standpoint. And I think you're going to see that with a lot of the veterans and the players in the NFL that constantly need babysitting versus the ones that might even do better with more free time. And I think that some of the athletes we've had the opportunity and been blessed to work with and have relationships with over the years, I think they've used this to their advantage to take a longer amount of time to either build in skill sets or maybe add something to the list I think, Bobby, we've talked about this before. I like to have conversations with our guys coming in and almost approach it like an NBA offseason. Okay, do you want to add this long range jumper from this side of the court? But for a football player, it's, what part of your physicality do we want to change and answer? What part of your game do we want to answer? And when you get this much time, you can add things to the list. And for the guys that we've been working with, that's most certainly what we've been doing.
How many Cowboys players have you had working out there, Bobby?
Through the years, it's off and on. We've had a few in this offseason. For me, I'm a more of a performance consultant, talking to individuals, setting plans and letting them work. But probably, this offseason, probably 5, 6, but through the years, we've had 10 to 12. It just depends. It's 60 miles from their door to ours. So it's a ways, and for them to come out, there's got to be a problem to be solved. There's a lot out there to help those guys.
Not a lot of problems to be solved, I imagine, with Patrick Mahomes. You were just talking about professionalism. What makes that kid so special?
He's a unicorn. Patrick is never content, and he's got this confidence about him that's incredibly just unique, in a way that it's respectful, but it's always present no matter what that we're doing. And, he's just one of the more creative people that I've ever known from a physical standpoint. He can move in 8 different directions better than most of us can move forward and backward. He can produce power in 8 different force vectors better than anybody can in one. And that's upper body and a lot of times lower body and even speed in a small range and in any type of scenario in which it's 3 to 6 feet, he's an elite mover. And so it's not just that he's out there doing this wheels off thing. We see it. And the throws he makes, those off-platform throws, he practices those things. And it's not just happenstance that it happens in the game. So, there's so many things that make him unique, but the way he treats people, you don't ever have to tell him anything twice. He's constantly improving at a rate that I've never seen at everything that he works at. And he's competitive. This offseason, he was out running NFL linebackers and running backs in workouts that were timed in the 4.5s in short sprints and letting them know about it. and anything we do with a radar gun, anything we do that's a lift, he just attacks it, man. He loves every day. He enjoys. He has a lot of fun. I've never worked with an athlete that just has more fun every day. So I could go on and on.
He's such a good kid. When you say unicorn, I've told Bobby this story, and names will be withheld here. But rookie season, he was in town with his girlfriend, and as a rookie, he was sort of incredulous about some of the Cowboys players. And he approached a Cowboys player who didn't really pay much attention to him. And he had said to me, "I never want to be like that." And I said, "You never will," because he is just such a different cat. But that was a story about Patrick that just really stood out to me. And you talk about how he is people. He is just a lovely, lovely human who makes a lot of sense in Kansas City.
Yeah, I'm happy for him. Rarely do we see people get what they deserve. And, he's getting just that. And he's got an opportunity to build a real legacy for himself. And, I couldn't be more happy. It's exactly what you've seen is exactly who he is.
Bobby, I know that you don't just, prep these guys for, the 40 time and do other things like that. You really get down to where they're at physically and where they may have some weaknesses and where they need to improve. So knowing the totality of physical performance and things like that, how much do you think this season we're at potential risk, I guess, with such little time to ramp up and not the same sort of physical reps that we see typically during the summer? How much at risk do you think we are at seeing an increase in injuries early on in the season whenever it is that they take the field?
I think we're at a high exposure. I think a lot of the players learned their lesson from the 2011 lockout. I think the injuries were up in around 30%. But the way I equate it to guys is if you work on your skills, that's working on the race car driver aspect of it. At some point, you've got to focus on the vehicle that you're driving. And if you don't, that vehicle will diminish over time. No matter how good a car that is, if you've ever had a sports car or a high-end motorcycle that requires a lot of maintenance. And some of these guys get out of balance when they get free time. They don't necessarily stop working. They just do the things they like. Mm-hmm. So what you're prone to is you're prone to little things that can sneak up that have just been neglected. And it's not from lack of effort. It's from not having a team of people with different agendas and responsibilities watching over every aspect of your performance. And that's why there's value there. Now, like I said, some people are going to come in and they're going to have some of the better seasons of their life because they've had times to get things straight, physically, mentally, and spiritually. So there's a lot that goes to it. But when you look at an athlete, it's mainly chain reaction biomechanics. It's how can they function with the organism that they have, and their proprioception abilities, their abilities to perceive and react in space. That's independent of strength and speed. Those are athletic markers that you can call intangible, but they've got to be honed and trained, because if not, when you get out there and you're using those things, if your tissues haven't been exposed to it, your risks go up. And so, trying not to be too nerdy with you, but the risks are high. I mean, they are. And we know that the offense and defense, one's going to be way ahead of the other. It's a debate on which one you think. But the first game, there's risk for people missing assignments and doing certain things. And there's going to be some freaky plays out there week 1 and week 2.
Do you think that, some of the college guys who were getting in that pre-draft work and were ramping up during a time when veterans were maybe recharging or off to the side, and then COVID hits and they don't have access to those facilities the way they normally would to go back and start getting their bodies in shape? Do you think there's an opportunity here for maybe some of these rookies, whereas they won't be as caught up on some of the nuances or the X's and O's as the veterans, that they've got a physical advantage due to the fact that they were doing all the pre-draft training and that their bodies are in a better spot right now than potentially some of these veterans are?
I think it's possible, depending on the issues that they had from a physical standpoint. But the draft preparation process, depending on where you go, there's not a lot of training that you do that's going to cross over. Now, we try to have a healthy mix that puts guys in a position to go play. And we've got a good track record for guys coming in and playing early. However, when you're just running 40s and practice on 40 starts and measurement focus type drills, that's definitely not preparing your body for resiliency. And resiliency is a key component in the game of football. So a lot of the things that these young kids, these rookies, don't do well is they don't eat and they don't sleep well. And that factors into day-to-day competition being inconsistent. And then with those inconsistencies, risk factors go up. Because when you get into those NFL training camps, as you know, like what they're experiencing now, they're having game day competition every single day. And a lot of them don't have the mental stamina for that yet, just because they haven't been exposed. And they definitely don't have the physical stamina for that yet. And so I would love to say there's an advantage for some of the rookies, and maybe there is on certain positions and certain guys. But veterans always know what to expect, and they've got a confidence about their ability to make it through that. And quite honestly, they're able to angle their preparation to fit what's worked for them in the past. So I think that the veterans are heavily advantaged in this, and I think a lot of them are going to retain their jobs more than normal, unfortunately, for the rookies coming in.
Before we let you go, I am curious. Obviously, this is a hypothetical, and we don't know what the spring's going to look like as it relates to COVID. But, with so many of these conferences canceling football, some of them trying to play in the spring, and even our own Tom Pelissero talking about this notion that we could have a draft as late as June 2nd without going back to the CBA table. How do you think this is going to affect a player that may not play a year of football, or may play football in the spring and then is going to be required to somehow get a combine? Is this going to be where facilities like yours are important in the sense that they're going to get tape, they're going to get I'm just kind of curious, you and some of the guys you work with, have you guys been kicking around what the future is going to look like as all of this relates to the NFL next season?
I think that's an excellent question. And I know this seems counterintuitive, but we want what's best for the players. And for a long time, I've advocated against the combine. And I think what's best is that the draft happen right after the season. there's really no reason to go make these guys do this anymore because you've got all this information. Communication lines are open. You know what, from their strength coaches what they have done and what they can do. You can even go watch workouts. Many of these conferences have GPS data, so if you're unfamiliar with that, they wear chips on game day and in practice, and they get their max miles per hour, their power output. They know how fast these guys are. So there's no reason to go out there and see, okay, if I sleep deprive these athletes, put them in one of the coldest places in the planet for a week, away from everybody they know, and then see how they run the fourth day. What are we really testing? What are we doing? And I know that sounds crazy from somebody that trains combine, but if they move football to the spring and they had the draft 4 weeks after that and no combine, I think the scouts that are good at their job are going to still do the best, and the ones that aren't good at their job are still going to do the worst. And hopefully we start drafting the best football players. And I think if you look at the track record the last 3 years especially, there's less people picked on combine performance. Maybe in the third round there's some reaches for some character guys. Second round is extreme. But combine performances are being less and less of a determining factor on where guys get drafted. And quite honestly, I think that's a positive thing. I would much rather spend the entire offseason working on rebuilding an athlete for how they want to attack and play this game at the next level. It'd be more valuable for us. It'd be more valuable for them. And I think it would help with the draft evaluations as well.
Well, to your point, I mean, the Rams and the Raiders clearly thought as much of that because they weren't one didn't show up. The other was only there for 1 day. So I thought that was interesting. Bobby, you got any others for him?
I mean, just the last thing I'm a little curious about, because I know we mentioned we started out with one, sort of reclamation project or comeback story, and we talked about how we all love those. I know somebody else that we're hearing a little bit of discussion about now here is that Randy Gregory may get reinstated soon, and I know that that's actually a guy who, for a lot of people who don't know, Randy's been putting in work off the field pretty consistently, and I know that that's somebody that actually came to APEC at one point in the last year or so to get in his work. What were your impressions of him and where he's at?
I think Randy, again, has a lot of passion and seems to be incredibly dedicated to this journey right now. And speaking to him, it's incredibly important that he do this. And I think that he's made a lot of changes in his life personally, and you can tell by the tone of his voice that he's ready for this next step. Physically, he looks incredible. I mean, he's always been imposing, but from our standpoint, he's gained weight. He was consistent with his work. He's always been an elite mover for his position. And so a lot of those things that he was thought they could develop, they have developed physically. And I think that he'll be an asset to any team. He was always a great player. With the personal issues that he had or the way those things were viewed by the league is probably a better way to put it. I think that with those behind him, it's a no-brainer. And I think those things are most definitely behind him. Our experience with him was nothing but class. He was very professional. He came in and worked with one of our coaches probably for a long period of time, made some good strides. And the guy was driving an hour each way. He didn't have to do that. And we were impressed with his work ethic, and we were impressed with just the person he was and his dedication. So I think he's a great pickup, and I hope things get worked out quickly. I hope the league answers the bell and finishes this evaluation of what they want to do with him and let him go on with his life. Because at this point, he's a grown man that's done everything he needs to do to put himself in position for success, and he needs an opportunity to succeed or fail right now on his own merit.
I always love when we get other people to come in as a second layer because, like I said, sometimes I think we get pegged the Dez and Randy fan club. But when you interact with these guys and have authentic relationships and communication with them, as you have, Bobby, you sort of get it. And I don't think some people take the time to get to know these guys, and it's just it's a lazy and it's an easy narrative just to dismiss some of them. But I celebrate second chances, and I know Jerry does for that matter too. So
Exactly.
Bobby, thank you so much for your time. Such a wealth of information, and looking forward to see how your guys do throughout the season. And fingers crossed, none of those accidents that I think that we're possibly expecting to see in the first and second week in the absence of a preseason. None of those are too serious, and your guys especially stay healthy.
God bless you guys. I appreciate you having me on.
All right, so looking forward to finally seeing these guys in pads. Felt so good to have a real football podcast, Bobby, right?
I know. We're actually talking about football now and not, implications of sickness and, all sorts of logistical stuff. We're actually going to, see ball being played, which I know everybody's thankful for.
Looking forward to it. So we'll see you on the next one. Thanks for sticking with us in the pod.